Welcome to Dialogue. Today we are diving deep into a concept that is, frankly, pretty unsettling. It's an idea that might fundamentally change how you view global affairs.
It really does.
We're exploring the notion that human conflict, what we all call war, has changed its very nature, that it's moved from being a tragedy, a failure of diplomacy.
Or a terrible necessity, even.
Right, and it's become something else entirely, something more integrated into our global systems, a profitable, repeatable product with a consistent revenue stream.
And that requires a kind of rigorous critical thinking to even get your head around. We're going to ask you to look past the usual language, past the flags and the patriotic rhetoric.
And look at what?
At the core financial incentives, the things that are really driving this massive interlocking machine. The goal here is to help you understand these complex systems where the metric for success isn't peace, it's budgetary stability. It's long-term capital growth, really, regardless of the human cost.
The stakes are just enormous because the language we all hear, on the news or in political speeches, it often acts as this kind of beautiful shield for a much more brutal economic reality.
Absolutely. You hear phrases like global stability or national security objectives.
And those sound important. They are important concepts. But then you look at the quarterly reports, at the investor briefings for the organizations involved in these conflicts.
It's a completely different vocabulary. It's a different world.
A much more cynical one.
That financial language is the key. It's the Rosetta Stone that lets you translate what looks like human tragedy and political chaos into what it is on a balance sheet. Asset growth and predictable returns.
So the shocking claim, the one that's really at the heart of our deep dive today, is this. While we, as individuals or communities, see conflict as an absolute disaster,
A catastrophe.
there's a mindset, a powerful one, within certain sectors where that same persistent managed instability is not just tolerated, it's actively seen and categorized as a growth opportunity.
And that's the disconnect. The huge chasm between viewing a conflict as a moral reckoning, this feeling of we must never repeat this,
And on the other side,
seeing that exact same conflict as a guaranteed recurring line item on a very profitable balance sheet, one that ensures the company is viable for decades to come.
so let's get into the mechanics. How did this transformation actually happen?
To really get it, you have to start with the historical contrast. It's really stark. Historically, a major conflict was understood, at least ideologically, as a profound societal collapse.
It was the end of the line, the point where you'd exhausted every single diplomatic option.
And that led to this collective sense of failure. If you look at the aftermath of the huge conflicts in the mid-20th century, it was all defined by this idea of a moral reckoning.
That powerful sentiment of let's never do this again.
Right. And it wasn't just a feeling. It drove monumental shifts in how the world was governed. It led to the creation of huge international systems that were explicitly designed to stop it from happening again. The tragedy was supposed to be the teacher.
And the outcome was meant to be prevention.
That is the critical distinction,
Yeah.
because that language of failure, of reckoning, it's been almost completely scrubbed from the modern discussion.
So what happens now when tensions flare up somewhere?
Well, the immediate translation in certain circles isn't necessarily how do we solve this diplomatically. It's an event that causes stock tickers for certain companies to go up.
It means more high-end lobbyist luncheons in the Capitol.
And most predictably of all, it means locked-in increases for defense budgets year after year after year.
This is where that financial language is just. It's unavoidable. And the cynicism is so raw when you see it, you don't even have to dig that deep. It's in publicly available corporate filings.
The language is so sanitized, so abstract, it almost becomes absurd. But it tells you everything about the system's real priorities.
You see companies reporting that they're, what's the phrase, exceeding projections due to geopolitical instability.
Exactly. And that's used as a positive indicator. It's a good thing for the forecast model.
Let's just pause on that for a second. When you or I, as a citizen, a taxpayer, when we hear geopolitical instability, we think of death, displacement, economic collapse.
The breakdown of civil order, human suffering.
Right. But an analyst on Wall Street reads that same line in an earnings report, and they're not thinking about the human cost. They're celebrating. Because in this model, instability translates directly into secured, multi-year contracts.
And dramatically increased revenue certainty. It's just proof of market demand.
The source material we looked at was so blunt in translating this. It's dark, but it's clear.
It is. When you see a chart or a statement about revenue growth driven by sustained conflict environments,
What does that actually mean? In plain English.
the human translation is profoundly simple. people didn't stop killing each other fast enough for our bottom line to suffer.
The profitability is entirely dependent on the conflict continuing, not on it being resolved.
It's a subscription model for chaos. If the war ends too quickly, the subscription gets canceled, and the company risks a catastrophic quarter for its shareholders.
So what does this financialization, what does it do to the actual strategy, the people making the decisions?
It has catastrophic implications. If the main driver for this vast global system is profitability and shareholder value, the entire strategy has to shift.
Away from what we would think of as victory.
Exactly, away from a rapid military victory and demobilization, which, by the way, means immediate cost-cutting.
So instead of optimizing for that,
The system starts to optimize for continuity. The entire incentive structure dictates that a state of tension, of managed low-level conflict, becomes the most financially desirable outcome. It's far more valuable than the success of peace.
this changes the entire mission. Whether it's written down or not, it's just understood.
The goal of the organizations supplying the conflict, the weapons, the logistics, the intelligence, it's no longer about achieving a definitive peace.
The goal becomes ensuring sustained, predictable, continuous demand for their products and services.
Yes. Conflict is redefined. It goes from being an aberration, a crisis to be solved, to being a durable, manageable, and highly lucrative commodity.
Which leads you to question the very words we use.
It leads you straight to the terminology itself. We really have to challenge the premise of calling it the defense industry when you analyze its financial incentives.
We're conditioned to see it as protective, right? As a shield, a necessary reactive force.
Of course. But when you apply the cynical lens of the pure profit motive, that premise it completely falls apart.
Okay, so let's follow that logic. Let's take it to its most absurd conclusion. If the purpose of this huge industry was purely defensive, in that traditional sense,
Meaning guaranteeing total global safety, enduring peace.
then the best case scenario for humanity would mean what for them?
The financial self-destruction of their own industry? It's a paradox.
Right. Imagine a world where all threats just vanish tomorrow.
No wars. No perceived enemies. So no need for trillion-dollar weapon systems. No need for maintenance contracts. No need for these massive government budgets.
For a trillion-dollar global sector, that's not just an awkward situation.
It's a complete financial cataclysm. It would be a forced liquidation event driven by the success of their own stated purpose.
So if they can't afford to actually achieve their stated goal, their focus has to shift.
It shifts entirely inward. Their real priorities become defending their own internal metrics, the things that guarantee survival and expansion.
And what are those?
You look at where the lobbying money goes, where the strategic narratives are built. They're intensely focused on defending market share against their competitors.
Defending their relevance in the eyes of governments.
And most critically, defending budget justification, making absolutely sure that congressional money keeps flowing no matter what the actual global threat level is.
This leads to that really powerful, almost dark analogy that we came across.
That peace under this model isn't a victory, it's a business disruption.
A business disruption. It's something that has to be managed, mitigated, and overcome.
It's a moment of severe contraction and financial uncertainty. The system has to react immediately to find a new market or, well, to create a new threat.
The analogy that really stuck with me was comparing it to a giant media company. Peace is like Netflix announcing, well, we've decided storytelling has ended. We've told all the stories.
So we're shutting down the servers tomorrow. The reaction on Wall Street wouldn't be, hooray for art.
It would be absolute panic.
Immediate short selling. They can't just voluntarily destroy their own revenue stream by declaring mission accomplished.
And this is where it's so critical for you, the listener, to connect the dots. This isn't just about military policy. This is a foundational lesson in how to analyze any large industry.
It applies everywhere. You have to learn to look past the comforting, noble name, whether it's defense or healthcare or education.
To understand the core financial incentives, what is this system actually designed to reward?
Because if it's designed to reward expansion, perpetuity, and budgetary continuity, it will find a way to perpetuate the very conditions that guarantee its own existence.
So the implication is profound. The defense sector can't truly embrace its stated purpose, complete global security, without undermining its own survival.
So it needs managed, predictable insecurity to thrive. It needs that constant low-level hum of operations.
A financial hum.
That's a good way to put it. A financial hum that ensures the constant flow of taxpayer funds and justifies maintaining this massive global infrastructure.
So the goal isn't to eradicate instability, it's to successfully manage it. Keep it
Mhm.
operational, keep it predictable.
But never, ever solve it.
And that kind of management strategy requires a very specific, optimized type of conflict.
The forever war.
Right. That financial model we've been talking about, it can't really handle a traditional big war.
You'd think it would. A huge World War II-style conflict seems like the ultimate business opportunity, and it does create these massive temporary spikes in production and profit. But they're ultimately terrible for the model of sustained, predictable, long-term revenue. They're just too messy.
Too messy how? They have a definitive ending, and an ending is where the subscription model terminates.
Exactly. They also lead to rapid demobilization, they create national guilt, introspection, all of which leads to budget cuts.
And they require a ton of political explanation and accountability afterwards.
Right. Politicians and shareholders much prefer the quiet, steady hum of continuous funding over the volatile spike and crash cycle of total war.
So what the model demands, what it's optimized for, is the forever war.
It's the perfect product for continuous, low-risk, high-profit continuity.
And these are distinct. They're characterized by being low intensity, geographically spread out.
And crucially persistent. They have just enough chaos to require continuous intervention.
Which means high-tech weapons and highly paid contractors.
But never enough resolution to actually declare mission accomplished, pack up, and go home. They are the perfect mechanism for maintaining stable, continuously growing budgets.
The pop culture reference that came up was just so perfect, like a TV series that should have ended 5 seasons ago.
It's exactly that. Everyone watching knows the main story has run out of steam. The villains are just recycled versions of old ones. The plot holes are massive.
But the network keeps renewing it.
Because the studio is making reliable money on it, on syndication, on merchandise, so they just keep it going for just one more season. The conflict persists because the underlying infrastructure needs new content to justify itself.
And this is maintained institutionally through a specific kind of narrative, the just one more deployment model.
Yes. Every single one of these conflicts, no matter what's actually happening on the ground, is perpetually framed as being on the verge of completion.
It just needs one final critical push.
You hear this language constantly. In political speeches, in media briefings, the conflict is almost over. We just need just one more push. We're always at a turning point.
But these phrases aren't actually describing the situation.
No, they're justificatory mechanisms. They're designed purely to sustain public and political support for more spending and, critically, for more deployments.
Can you give a concrete example of how that works, the shifting goalposts?
Sure. Imagine a mission is defined to secure a specific region. The original goal is narrow. Capture this one town. So that's achieved. But instead of declaring success, the goalpost immediately moves. But now we have to stabilize the entire valley.
And once the valley is stabilized.
Well, the real objective is transferring authority to a stable local government. But of course, that local government needs perpetual support, training, and defense from external forces.
So the mission never actually ends.
It can't. The criteria for success just keep expanding, which ensures the budget line remains intact. The turning point just keeps turning forever. The exit strategy is always classified or postponed.
So from the cynical financial viewpoint, the lack of resolution isn't a failure.
It is, quite literally, a success of the continuous financial model. It's proof that it's working as designed.
And the systemic cost of this must be astronomical beyond just the direct spending.
It is. It means the entire massive infrastructure, the forward bases, the intelligence networks, the supply lines, the contractors, it all remains active and fully funded, perpetually.
That continuity is what the financial markets demand. It guarantees the whole sector is seen as a stable long-term investment.
And it also means that all those resources, both the people and the materials, are tied up in these unendable scenarios. That money, those taxpayer dollars, can't be used for anything else.
Like infrastructure projects at home.
Or humanitarian aid, or anything else. The forever war guarantees that this massive expense remains a fixed, non-negotiable part of the budget.
So let's shift from the conflict itself to the products, the weapons. This is a critical idea, that weapons are financial products that have to keep moving.
Yes. The traditional idea that weapons are for deterrence, they're so scary they're never used, that's just not compatible with the need for quarterly growth.
$1 trillion fighter jet that just sits in a hangar for 20 years?
Yeah.
That's a problem.
It's a profound financial failure. It's a stranded asset. It costs money to store. It's depreciating on the balance sheet. Those assets have to be monetized
They're designed to be tested, deployed.
and ultimately replaced by the next, more expensive generation. The product life cycle has to be continuous for the corporation to be viable. A missile that never launches is just a warehouse expense.
A drag on future revenue.
Exactly. So to make sure they get used and replaced, the system has to perpetually manufacture the need for deployment.
And this is done through a really specific three-pronged justification cycle.
The first pillar is the foundation for everything. Create threat inflation.
Mean what?
Meaning you take a relatively minor, localized threat, a regional strongman, a small extremist group, and you amplify their danger through rhetoric, through constant media coverage, through white papers.
You make it sound like an existential global danger.
An immediate one that requires the most advanced and therefore the most expensive systems available right now. A few hundred fighters in one small region becomes the vanguard of a global movement that threatens the homeland.
And that justifies buying weapons designed for a massive state-on-state war.
Which have a huge price tag. Pillar 2 is just as important. Define enemies broadly.
Avoid specific, solvable problems.
Right. You can't profit forever from a problem you can actually solve. So the enemy becomes an amorphous, boundaryless concept. Instability, radicalism, terrorism.
Things that can, in some form, be found everywhere.
And so the need for intervention and the need to deploy weapons also exists everywhere, perpetually. It justifies a massive global footprint. The difference between fighting a specific group in a specific city and fighting the global war on X is the difference between a project and a business model.
And the third pillar.
Label resistance as instability. Any local group that resists the current status quo is automatically categorized not as a movement with legitimate grievances, but as a symptom of a global instability that must be managed externally.
The image of a dartboard labeled Enemy of the Month comes to mind. It captures that arbitrary nature of how threats are designated.
And it always seems to align perfectly with whatever new inventory needs to be sold.
This all leads directly into how the tech itself is marketed, especially precision weapons.
Oh, yes. They are sold with a very refined ethical justification. They're marketed as cleaner, smarter, more humane.
The implication being that technology can somehow civilize war, make it more palatable to the public.
More acceptable to politicians who have to worry about collateral damage.
But the core contradiction is just, it's right there. They still explode. They still kill.
They're still fundamentally destructive. The only real difference is that the act of killing is now justified with these polished PowerPoint slides showing minimal collateral damage and superior targeting.
It lets everyone, from the executive to the public, mentally distance themselves from the act of war itself.
You're no longer focused on the moral act. You're focused on the impressive, cost-effective efficiency of the technology.
It's a direct parallel to how any tech industry pushes product obsolescence.
It's identical. Think about your smartphone. It worked perfectly 2 years ago. But the manufacturer has to convince you that the new model is smarter, faster, cleaner, and absolutely necessary.
The defense industry just applies that same consumer model planned obsolescence, continuous upgrades, to lethal equipment.
Last year's missile is already obsolete. The entire inventory needs to be upgraded, and that guarantees the next round of multi-billion-dollar contracts for years to come.
But this whole system, it can't function without public buy-in, without budgetary approval from elected officials.
Absolutely not. Which means the defense sector sells stories, narratives, just as hard as it sells hardware. Conflict needs a compelling, morally sound public narrative to survive, especially in a democracy.
And that narrative relies on what you could call the greatest hits of moral language. These phrases that are so evocative, they just bypass critical thought.
They appeal directly to fear and patriotism. We hear them all the time. National security, upholding the rules-based order, the necessity of deterrence, protecting democracy.
And they're effective because who's going to argue against them? Who's campaigning against national security?
No one. But their vagueness is their superpower. It lets them be used to justify actions that are highly specific, often interventionist, and always incredibly expensive.
Without ever needing to define which democracy is being protected or from whom.
The definitions are intentionally slippery.
And one of the most powerful and persistent of these narratives is that classic emotional hook. If we don't fight them there.
It's a masterful piece of rhetorical engineering. It implies imminent, unavoidable, catastrophic danger right here at home if you fail to act immediately, thousands of miles away.
It's labeled as emotionally powerful, logically empty, and endlessly reusable.
And it is. It's empty because the causal link is almost never proven, but it shuts down the debate. The presumed consequence of inaction is so dire that any argument for restraint or diplomacy sounds immediately irresponsible.
Or even unpatriotic.
It functions exactly like a Hollywood sequel. You've seen the premise a dozen times. The villain is vague, but the marketing is so urgent and compelling you feel like you have to buy the ticket.
And it guarantees more sequels, more spin-offs.
But these narratives aren't organic. They're cultivated and reinforced by a very sophisticated institutional structure.
Designed to give legitimacy to military action and defense spending.
Which brings us to the role of think tanks. Or, as the source rightly called it, war, but make it academic.
These organizations are critical because they present themselves as independent, neutral policy experts.
They're supposed to be offering objective analysis. They produce these exhaustive reports, full of charts and data, which gives the impression of objective truth.
But if you look closer,
You find a massive, systematic conflict of interest. Many of these organizations are heavily funded by the very defense contractors whose systems they're recommending for purchase.
or whose ongoing military actions they're endorsing as necessary.
It creates this perfect echo chamber. The policy reports consistently conclude that the only responsible option is more military spending or deeper intervention. The advice is always self-serving for their financial backers.
The satirical example really nails it. A serious report titled, "Escalation is the Least Bad Option," and you find out it was written by a former Raytheon vice president of strategic vision.
It highlights the revolving door. The advisory sector and the commercial sector are often the same people. The financial benefit of the advice being followed circles right back to the people who wrote it.
And then there's the media, which often acts as the unofficial marketing department for conflict, even if it's unintentional.
The coverage of any new conflict tends to follow a very predictable three-phase cycle.
Phase one is what? Flags, experts, urgency.
Right. The initial surge of emotional, patriotic reporting, nonstop coverage, a parade of talking heads, often from those same think tanks, who all endorse the intervention as morally necessary.
Very little dissent. And the initial budget gets approved fast.
Then comes phase two, the long operational phase. The reporting shifts. Casualties are acknowledged, but they're framed as regrettable but unavoidable.
And the new weapons systems being deployed are always framed as necessary.
And any dissenting voices, any skeptical analysis of the mission that gets marginalized, framed as naive.
And then the most important phase for the financial model, phase three.
Silence.
The conflict isn't over. Troops are still there. Money's still being spent.
The supply chain is at full capacity, but the news coverage just dries up, and that silence is an institutional signal to the public.
It's saying, this is still happening, the budgets are still flowing, but please stop asking questions. The issue has moved from urgent debate to normalized administrative budget management, which ensures its permanence.
So if you follow all this evidence logically, if instability is profitable and resolution is disruptive, you have to arrive at a really chilling conclusion.
That the system's real enemy isn't a country or a terrorist group.
It's peace itself. Peace, stability, and resolution are the ultimate threats to the viability of the entire structure.
Peace is just fundamentally bad for this particular business model.
When genuine stability threatens to break out, it triggers an immediate crisis inside the industry. It means budget cuts, layoffs, and most critically, shareholder panic.
Because the future revenue stream suddenly looks uncertain.
For the system, stability is terrifying. Instability sells stock and secures careers. If you're an executive whose bonus is tied to the performance of this sector, telling Wall Street that global tensions are decreasing is not good news.
It's a crisis. It's the worst possible news for a bullish market position. It means you have to scramble to find a new threat.
And we saw this happen. There's a clear historical example. The panic after the end of the Cold War.
When the big, overarching ideological enemy disappeared.
Defense budgets shrank dramatically. Demand for legacy Cold War weapons plummeted. It was an existential crisis for the sector.
And their response wasn't to celebrate peace.
Not at all. It was to immediately start a campaign to guarantee their future relevance. To survive, new enemies were discovered. They were strategically amplified.
The focus shifted from superpowers to regional instability, terrorism, rogue states.
All of which required smaller, more specialized, and highly profitable new systems. That strategic pivot from building bombers to building drones was necessitated by the success of peace. It ensured the sector could create demand for entirely new product lines.
And this creates a kind of horrifying self-fulfilling prophecy, a closed loop that guarantees conflict.
It's a flawless feedback mechanism. It ensures continuous demand.
Let's walk through that cycle. Step 1. Arm a region. Flood an area with sophisticated weapons, often giving them to multiple competing sides.
Step 2, tensions rise, which is the inevitable consequence of what you just did.
Step 3. Violence breaks out.
Step 4, more arms are sent, because the violence is now used as proof that the region was unstable all along and needed intervention.
Step 5. Violence escalates, because everyone now has more lethal tools.
And the final systemic conclusion. The system points to the chaos and says, see, they're unstable and need our continuous assistance.
Completely ignoring the fact that it helped engineer the problem in the first place by flooding the region with weapons.
The industry positions itself as the necessary solution to a problem it helped create. And that's how the market for conflict is perpetually reinforced and expanded.
Which brings us to the final, stark disconnect that defines this whole system.
The language is always moral. It's about protecting democracy, securing freedom, upholding international law.
But the true incentive structure that drives it is completely amoral. It's focused only on financial metrics, on growth and perpetuity.
The ultimate measure of any system is what it rewards. So what are the people at the top actually rewarded for?
You can look at their executive bonuses. They're tied to things like contracts secured, units delivered.
And often embedded in the strategic goals, they're tied to conflicts prolonged through sustained engagement.
Now compare that to what they are not rewarded for.
Executive pay is not tied to lives saved. It's not tied to the number of conflicts resolved or peace treaties signed.
The very things that would signal success for humanity are the exact signals of profound financial failure for the industry.
That is the system's core tension. And it explains why the status quo is so incredibly robust and persistent, even after decades of documented failures to achieve lasting peace.
The system persists because it feels familiar to everyone. It's a deep-rooted part of the political and economic landscape.
It rewards insiders magnificently through contracts, through the revolving door between government and industry, through high-paying lobbying jobs.
And crucially, it severely punishes dissent. If you question the fundamental mechanism, if you suggest endless war isn't necessary,
you immediately sound unpatriotic or just idealistic.
the prevailing assumption in the halls of power becomes that endless war is the mature position.
Exactly. The person who accepts perpetual conflict and spending is seen as the sober realist. The person advocating for a radical shift towards peace is just a naive idealist who doesn't get how the world works.
And that framework protects the system from any real accountability, from any overhaul, and most importantly, from any financial contraction. It makes challenging the status quo a political liability.
So to sum up, our deep dive has really been about 3 critical transformations of conflict. It's been normalized, treated as an inevitable, essential part of the global economy.
Financialized, where instability is openly seen as a growth opportunity.
And abstracted, distanced from its human cost, through layers of corporate language, complex tech, and moral rhetoric.
So the fundamental question being asked is no longer, should we fight this conflict to achieve a specific end?
The question being answered by the financial markets is, how long can we sustain this as a financially viable operation?
And peace, which we think of as the ultimate goal, is treated in this model like a reckless experiment.
A dangerous variable that has to be managed and kept at bay to protect the financial integrity of the system built around conflict.
The final thought, the one this analysis forces on us, is probably the most provocative. If peace threatens an industry's survival, then maybe the industry, not peace, is the problem.
And that core tension between the moral imperative to resolve conflict and the powerful systems built for financial perpetuity is what demands a rigorous, critical thinking in the world today.
If you enjoyed this conversation, please like, subscribe, and share this video. Also, let us know in the comments what really stood out to you in this conversation, and if there's any related topic or new topic that you would like covered in a future video.